This is an alfalfa grass mixture. We seeded it in the fall of 16. Then last year it didn't get tall enough, so we just grazed it. And then this year we hayed it. I got a little over 3 bales to the acre off of it. And then probably this fall we'll graze it for a few days.
Mike, did you prime the planting? Did you use cover crops on it before you seeded the grass on this particular
This
one?
this did have a cover crop probably 2 years prior to seeding it.
Two
This
years in a row?
had a corn on it, and then we went to a cover crop, then oats, and then into alfalfa grass.
Okay. Yes?
Any questions?
Any trouble with bloat?
No.
Say the question.
Any trouble with blow? No.
Have you ever thought of feeding out here to put some nutrients back in?
We do on another site. We do. We feed during the winter.
Yes? I guess you're up, Greg.
Well, I'm a pretty poor one to talk to about hay. We don't put up any hay on our farm. Did the cost analysis of it. I can't afford to put up hay. And so we found, if you, and I'm not beating up, sure don't take this I'm beating up on Mike, because I'm not. We're in a different environment. We do get more rainfall, but we have found that we can buy hay a whole lot cheaper than we can put it up. And normally on the farms, you look at your best hay ground, that's the land that we could be grazing. And we talked about our recovery periods down there a while ago. So let's just say you got, 400 or 500 acres of hay land. How many cow days is that robbing you out of in your grazing rotation? So you got to calculate the cost of that. You've lost some income there because you could be putting pounds of weight on a beef animal. I know you got to have hay, and so I'm not going to sit here and say you can't make it. Just look at the costs on your own farm. Sometimes it's cheaper to buy it. And I think Jim's put out some numbers, what the cost is of nutrients in a bale. A 1,200 pound net wrap bale is at around $30-$40. I mean, at today's
It's about $55 a ton right now. So
Okay,
yeah, say
$55
$40 on a 1,200 pound bale.
Yeah. So if you look at that, people say, but you're robbing somebody else's nutrients, and you're bringing them to your farm. You didn't rob it; you bought it. You paid good money for it. So you don't feel like you're stealing it. They sold it, and you bought it. Okay. You're the smart one. You're bringing nutrients onto your farm. You're gonna grow more grass. And we don't ever feed hay in a feed yard. We always put it out on the farm. We have the bales stacked before winter ever gets there. They're always up on a hill, so we can use gravity to get them unrolled. And our cows are moved all winter long, all the way around all of our farms. So if we do get some snow, we can unroll some hay. If it's clean, we're going to be grazing winter stockpile. We do grow fescue there, so we have a lot of that in the wintertime, it's a big one. It really takes us through the winter. It stays green, or it can if you graze it correctly. But so on the hay, you got to remember this. Haying promotes what? Monocultures. Grazing promotes diversity. So the more you graze, the more diversity of plants you're going to have. When you take hay off, you're also exposing more bare soil. When you mow hay down, it doesn't grow back as quickly as if you grazed it off. So a grazed pasture will always recover faster if it's grazed correctly. It'll always come back quicker than a mowed field will. So we're all about trying to, we're in the solar energy business. We want as many green blades of grass out there as many days of the year as possible.
Try to keep everything in one hand. In one hand here if I can. I had the privilege of managing two very large ranches where we had a lot of hay meadows. One of them had 8,000 acres of irrigated hay meadows. 6,200 feet elevation, and you knew that some years you were going to have to feed hay. That's just what there was. You'd have snow belly deep, and we sold the haying equipment off those ranches because we didn't want to be tempted to hay. And on one of them, we never hayed anymore after we did that. We bought whatever hay we needed. On the other ranch, the larger, the one that had the 8,000 acres, once in a while we knew we had excess forage production, and when we would look at the price of hay and the price to buy in some stocker yearlings, we decided we'd talk to the people from whom we were buying hay, and we would see if they'd come and put up a little for us. They were typically alfalfa producers, and so they have a little time between cuttings. As a two-cutting country, and so they had a little time between cuttings. They could come do some meadow hay for us. But we just felt like it wasn't worth our time to actually be doing our own hay. And I don't want to be critical of those who do, but you know, we were in an area where a lot of that hay would go out as dairy quality, and we still felt like we wanted to buy the hay. Now, the thing we did, we built hay sheds, because we didn't want to have to feed that hay unless we had to. And you know what happens to a roll of hay or a big square bale of hay if it sits out there 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 winters, and summers with rain, it kind of gets a little poorer each year and a little less each year. But we put up the hay buildings, the hay sheds, and that hay might sit there 4 or 5 or 6 years. We didn't feed it unless winter said we had to feed it, and when we had to feed it, then we'd replenish it. But we ran a lot of numbers. There was a year once in a while when that hay price would bite you pretty good, but that didn't happen very often. We averaged it out. It was just better for us to not have all that equipment, and we focused on cows and grazing, and we grazed those meadows with stocker cattle in the summertime and followed through with mother cows in the wintertime. What the stockers left over, if you expected the stockers to get good gain, was pretty darn good winter feed for a cow. So we did quite a bit of that, and I guess I'm kind of in that same camp that Greg talks about. Is I just want to cut hay feeding to the bare minimum. I say the cow's got a mouth and 4 legs, and darn it, she can feed herself, and the more days of the year she feeds herself, the better off you're going to be economically, I'm convinced.
I got a question. Got your numbers down on hay. How far away can you go to buy that hay? Because it's not close here.
Well, that's part of the equation. You put wheels under hay for a long ways, and it gets pretty expensive, and so you have to figure that out. But again, if you can, on average, minimize the number of days that you have to feed, you can afford to pay more for hay than you usually think. I don't remember the numbers now. We used to work the equations, and the arithmetic's probably changed a little today anyway, and it would be different in your situation. But those are the numbers you need to run. How far does it have to come, and how much more is that going to make it cost?
Well, it was costing $5,000 a load last year.
Yeah, and so, and then you just have to say, okay, how much are we saving back home? And now the thing you have to remember, Greg pointed out that, hey, you've got a lot of animal days to feed out there that you just put in a bale that the cows could graze. So everything you buy in increases your carrying capacity. You can now run more cows because you've bought in feed and you've grazed what you were formerly haying. Well, you've got a big nut of fixed costs. And so you've just spread those fixed costs across more cows. And that's an economic factor that you need to figure into the whole equation too.
Any other? Yeah, back here, Josh.
I was just going to add something to that, Burke. One of the things after sitting on a tractor for a lot of
Come
hours.
here. You need that mic and the other mic.
One of the things that I've thought a lot about, and I'm not saying I'm right or wrong with this, but what is our time worth when we're sitting on that tractor making hay? One of the things the last couple of summers that has been sacrificed by making hay, because I thought I could make it cheaper, and maybe I can, maybe I can't, but what was sacrificed was my grazing management because I wasn't out doing things better on there. So how much production did I sacrifice by doing a poor job on my grazing management because I was trying to put hay together so that I could keep more cows? Now maybe it's less cows and better management. Maybe it's not so much hay, but like you said, Burke, maybe I can pay more for that hay if I'm making up for it in other places. So understanding what things you do well in the resources that you have available and how to best use those, or how to best optimize the potential of those resources may also indicate to whether we should be making hay, buying hay, or some sort of combination of the two.
But on a
One
deal,
more question, and then Dave, go ahead.
on a situation like this where there is a hay field up here in the north, some people, we need to have hay. Would we be better off putting deep water in wherever we put our water tanks, winter cells or winter water tanks, so that we can be grazing land like this all winter long, instead of trying to do shallow water lines quick, and then in the wintertime where we're not able to use a place like this because, well, there's no water. Because if you feed hay, you pretty much have to have water. They say you can't, but boy, they sure fight if they get water. They're lacking it.
Okay, I think you caught that it's shallow water versus deep water line so that you can winter graze. First thing I ask, and I don't know what the water sources are, is where's that water coming from? If you have a spring, which I don't know if there's springs around here or not, but if you can spring flow water, I mean, where we live, it also gets cold. And the recommendation for burying lines is 7 feet to be below the frost line, which is very expensive. Our winter water is spring water, and our water lines that we use in the winter, some are as shallow as 6 inches, down to about 30 inches are the deepest of our winter water lines, but we flow water continuously because we have that spring source. If you have, I'm driving around and flying in, I saw a lot of bodies of water. I don't know who they belong to. I don't know how deep they are, how much water is in those. But some of these lakes and reservoirs that I've seen coming in here, I think you could pump water all winter. And again, we do a lot of number crunching. And some people say, man, I can't afford to pump water all winter. But you know what? Compare it to putting in 5 miles of pipeline 7 feet deep, and you're going to find you can pump a lot of water. And so if you have a reservoir source that you don't have a lot of lift on and you can pump that water, I would not be afraid to pump water all winter just to avoid putting in those deep water lines. So those are just some of those, considerations that come into play. If you're drawing from wells and you're pulling water 800 feet out of the ground, the pumping cost is pretty high, and I'd be less inclined to want to do that. And then maybe putting in the deep lines is what makes more sense.